in the room some questions, but for those who are online, you can, of course, also at any moment in time, send your questions on the chat. We will be collecting them because some might be overlapping, and we will then resume them during the meeting or give you the floor if that's possible. Then for those who are in the room, we will be having a network event right after with some finger food, dessert, and some bubbles, which is the good news today. Introduction of the topic that we will be discussing today. I think everyone knows now that the Data Act was published exactly 4 months ago. It will be a very important proposal for the uptake of cloud solutions in Europe also. And today what we really will look into is the specific cloud-focused provisions and how they can accelerate the multi-cloud in Europe. So a lot to discuss today. I will now immediately hand over. We have a little video from the CEO of Cloudflare, Matthew Prince, and I hope that all the technicalities will work now. No? Almost. We're getting there. Stay tuned. And don't forget, please ask your questions on the chat. If you're online, we will collect all of them. Getting there?
Hello, my name is Matthew Prince, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cloudflare. We are delighted to host today's event in Brussels, together with our friends at Scaleway, about how to support customers looking to use multi-cloud or hybrid cloud models, and how legislation can help foster a more interoperable and competitive cloud market in Europe. Cloudflare's mission is to help build a better internet. The word help is important because we know we can't do it alone. So wherever we can, we work with others across the internet ecosystem to push the internet forward and make it better. Although the internet was brilliantly and thoughtfully designed, it was not architected to be performant, reliable, and secure, the characteristics that all businesses need today. To address that, we built a robust, scalable network that doesn't force organizations to choose between security and performance. Since Cloudflare's founding, we've taken steps to make available to everyone, from individual developers to small businesses to the largest corporations, the sort of speed, protection, and reliability that only a very few could afford before we came around. By listening to our customers, we opened for them our own serverless developer platform we call Workers, which enables them to deploy custom software on Cloudflare's network edge. Developers make up a significant portion of cloud users. Since 2017, nearly 500,000 developers, many in Europe, have built on Cloudflare's developer platform, and more than 2 million applications have been launched using Cloudflare Workers. A powerful aspect of our Workers platform is that it allows developers to store their data and run their code in the same regions where their customers are, respecting data locality in a way that no other cloud platform can. And we've listened to our customers in their journey into the cloud. Our customers want to be able to choose the products that best fit their compute and storage needs. For many customers, that may mean a mixture of public cloud, private cloud, and still some on-premise data centers. Whether you're a public sector organization, a large business organization, or a cloud-native company or startup, you should be free to make decisions on how, where, and when you can move your data. In reality, however, companies of all sizes face fees that lock them within a single cloud vendor. These costs, called Egress Fees, can climb rapidly, sometimes to the surprise of the customer. It's crazy to us that public cloud providers don't charge anything to take your data, but then charge you if you want to pull it back out of their systems. The result is that customers lose the ability to choose the best products and services for their particular use case. And what many of the public clouds do with their egress pricing is exactly the opposite of what's necessary to help build a better internet. That's why Cloudflare created the Bandwidth Alliance in 2019, by bringing together a group of like-minded partners committed to ensuring that users can access cloud resources at zero or significantly reduced egress fees. This initiative facilitates the building of modern, cloud-centric applications without design constraints and financial burden of egress costs, and enables competition across the ecosystem. Today, the Bandwidth Alliance partners include Scaleway, of course, Alibaba Cloud, Microsoft Azure, Oracle, Google Cloud, Tencent Cloud, and many more. AWS, the dominant player, unfortunately is the notable exception. And we keep pushing further to ensure customers have the ability and flexibility to move their data however they need. We launched R2 Storage in September of 2021 to offer developers the ability to store large amounts of data, expanding what's possible with Cloudflare while slashing egress bandwidth fees associated with cloud storage to zero. Today, we're excited to welcome you all to join the conversation. Together, we can create and protect a cloud market that is more competitive, less costly for customers, and free from vendor lock-in effects. Thank you for joining us and for sharing in our vision of helping build a better internet.
Okay. So as you can have noticed, everyone, I'm sorry for the people online. We realized that the sound wasn't going through, but the event is fully recorded and we will make sure that you will be able to see the video later on. But in order not to lose any time and to keep as many time as possible for questions, we will continue on and apologize for that. But we had a lot of people actually in the room. Now you're all happy that you came, that could really hear and see the little presentation of Matthew, CEO of Cloudflare. Introduction now, I would love to introduce you our speakers. Unfortunately, Pierre Chastanet couldn't make it today, so he apologized. He is online, of course, and will be connected. Pierre, are you there? Just sound checking, you never know.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. With a COVID voice, but hope you can hear me properly.
The COVID did strike again, but we will make it happen. We are so well connected for it. First, introducing our first speaker, Petra Arts. For those who don't know Petra, she's a senior public policy manager at Cloudflare, a company offering security and performance services to internet properties. She has 10 years of experience in EU and digital policy, working on issues such as cybersecurity and data policy. Welcome, Petra. Then we also have the pleasure to welcome today Yen Michel Yen, CEO of Scaleway, a French cloud computing company and web hosting company. Yen is a software engineer with an MBA. He's a serial entrepreneur, if I may say, having built successful companies in many different sectors and fields. He also is very active in the France Tech family, having co-founded France Digital and Paris Artificial Intelligence Hub. You also very much welcome, Yen. And then again, Pierre, if Pierre needs some introduction for most of you, Pierre is the head of the unit of cloud and software at DG Connect, the European Commission. Pierre has been working at the Commission in different roles for more than 15 years, and now on topics such as data, cybersecurity, privacy, and innovation policy. Pierre, again, very much welcome to you. So I hope, actually, we're 4 minutes early. Well done to me. Now we will give first the floor to each of the speakers 5 minutes. I will be looking at you or Pierre, it makes sense if you are talking too much, because we really, really want to make sure that we keep time for the questions and to keep this session as lively as possible. So first, I give the floor to Pierre. Pierre, you have the honor to open the discussion.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and I'm glad to be still able to participate with you, albeit virtually. So where are we a bit in the cloud in Europe right now? The Commission is monitoring very closely the take-up of cloud technology, because we consider, and this is the prime remit of my unit, that cloud is absolutely essential to support the digital transformation of any organization either public or private, going through a cloud transformation journey is absolutely essential to be able for organization to make use of more advanced digital technologies, artificial intelligence, big data analytics, blockchain. So if you want your organization to fully exploit the potential behind these advanced digital technologies, moving to the cloud is an absolute prerequisite. When we analyze currently in Europe the adoption of cloud, this is progressing, so that's good, but it's progressing slowly. So currently we have about 42% of European enterprises that are using cloud, but when we look a bit more in details, they are essentially using pretty basic services, email, file storage, these sort of things. They are not really using advanced digital services, and that's where really the productivity, competitiveness potential lie. So that's why we set out in the digital decade the target to have 75% of European enterprises using advanced cloud-based digital services by the end of this decade. One of the key concerns of companies when we survey them of why they are not moving or why they are not moving fast enough into the cloud is cybersecurity, of course, but it's also the problem related to a vendor. And the problem of vendor lock-in is something that has emerged for really a long time and that we have been trying to tackle at a pretty of cloud policy development. Some of you may recall when we adopted the first legislative proposal on free flow of non-personal data in 2017, the Commission was already addressing vendor lock-in effect in this legislative proposal because we could see that this was a key barrier for the adoption of cloud, but also to the free movement of data in Europe. There cannot be free movement of data if cloud service providers are locking their customers. This has somehow been aggravated by the acceleration in market concentration, notably on infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So the Commission duly facilitated the process that was foreseen in free flow of non-personal data. We stimulated the development of code of conduct by the industry to facilitate porting and switching of cloud services among different service providers. The industry completed their work. On the IaaS side, it's largely doing the job, but of course the degree of complexity in this market segment is a bit less. On the other end, for the upper layer of the cloud stack, notably on the software as a service, we have seen that this is really this remains a key problem, and that the code of conduct may not deliver what the Commission was expecting in the first place. In preparation of the impact assessment for the European Data Act, the Commission contracted independent lawyers to look at this code of conduct. The conclusion were pretty similar to the preliminary analysis of the Commission that this may not lead to the expected effect. So the Commission took the next step, which is to start making cloud switching obligation in the Data Act. We see this absolutely essential to have market fluidity among different type of data services. European user industries, European public sector should be totally free to use any cloud services that they want, and it should be easy for them to change service provider. And let me push this one step further beyond what is foreseen in the data provision on cloud switching, we that for organization, adopting a multi-cloud approach is absolutely essential. We're really recommending organizations that are moving to the cloud to start analyzing their data, their application, and the degree of risk that is associated with this data and application, and then adopt a cloud strategy that is commensurate to this risk. And to keep it very simple, our recommendation is don't put all your eggs in the same basket, and that's the basis of the multi-cloud approach. So it's essential for us to recreate the framework condition to have a competitive market for cloud services in Europe, and such competitive market that is driven by innovation, that is driven by novel features that the customers are demanding, that is driven by quality of service, that cannot exist if service providers are locking or trying to lock their customers. So I will leave it at this for the time being, and I'm sure we will have the opportunity to come back on several of these aspects. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Pierre. I can hear a lot of interesting things. Of course, there is quite a challenge ahead of us, the slow take-up, the need for anything that would avoid lock-in and multi-cloud. That is the future. We at least agree on that point. So with no further ado again, I'll hand over to Yen. Welcome, Yen. Your floor is yours.
So hello, everybody. Good to see you here in person and you online here. To me, the situation is clearly described by Pierre, and for those of you who could hear Matthew also. The notion today of multi-cloud is itself a solution to a greater problem. The greater problem being that even though the internet was designed in a pure and idealistic way 30 years ago, we always come back to this notion of portal or gatekeepers where too much power is being captured in one side of the market, whereas the internet is a tool, is an enabler for society at large. So the issue at stake is clearly our democracies, it's clearly the planet and the societies we leave to our children down the line. As a citizen of France, of Europe, as a technology provider, as a cloud provider, I feel that all of these issues need to be tackled in a very serious way, precisely because there's a lot at stake. When we talk about democracies, we talk about Europe, of course, we talk about the US, we have natural partnerships in between. But the point is, Europe is fragile. It is weak in the sense that we do not have control over our destinies. We have too much dependencies. So as a cloud provider, I believe that we provide the underlying technology that enables societies digitally, if you wish, that was mentioned. There was the evolution from the inception of the internet 30 years ago, where computers, servers were owned by individual entities. Nowadays, it moved to the cloud with a very specific as a service. And this notion of as a service creates the temptation, which is clearly mastered by some key players in the US, to create the lock-in for perpetual rent, if you wish, as a service. Now, this needs to be destructured, needs to be understood, deconstructed, and we come to the point where multi-cloud is one of the answers so that we can inject more levers into reversibility, into resilience, into geopolitical risk. In the end, it's also about risk management, where each of us play a role in deciding how society is resilient to wars. And we've had a number of events recently with Trump promoting America first in a very clear way, because America is facing their own challenges, also competing with China. We've had COVID, which has created a very sudden need for technology. And then we've had the war in Ukraine that challenges the very notion of Europe and creates the premises of what we call splinternet. So this is critical because the splinternet is basically the contrary of what we wish to see in order to keep the market providing solutions to take human society forward. So to me, it is paramount that we tackle the issues in a way that is responsible from the standpoint of European citizens, for instance, as decision makers, but also as business decision makers, where we will influence the way we leave society to our children down the line. So as a cloud provider, clearly, I look at the different technical issues that allow our clients to migrate from one cloud to the other, if they so wish. And egress fees is one of the issues that we need to tackle. The Cloudflare Bandwidth Alliance is one of these ideas where we can say that, in fact, data should be able to gravitate and move between providers, either for a true migration, which is one way, or to provide resilience and redundancy for end users, because end users should also be able to choose where their data lives and moves towards, because of legislation, because of personal preference, and so on and so forth. So in the end, the topic today is critical, I would say. I welcome the European Commission's efforts in that direction. There's a lot of awareness going on right now. The French government is extremely active on the topic as well, the European Commission as well. Pierre is really on point on all those topics. So that is great, because we need the regulators to look at it, but also as individuals, as decision makers, we play a role that is essential in this debate.
Thank you so much, Yen. Again, I hear we need global solutions, we need a global approach, we need more free flow of data and open market. That's a lot to take in, but at the same time, I'm sure that Claire is very much aware of the challenge. Before we continue and we open the Q&A question, I would now leave the floor to Petra, who will give a bit more on the intake of Cloudflare.
Yeah, thanks, Isabelle, and great to see everyone here. Yeah, apologies for those joining online that you were not able to hear the video of Matthew Prince, because you know, he had a really good, I think, introduction to kind of our general outlook, which I think is to a large extent very similar to what Jan just described. Maybe for those of you who do not, not so familiar with Cloudflare, but we are not maybe what you would call a traditional cloud service provider. We provide a number of internet infrastructure services that are all based on a cloud network, such as content delivery network services, DNS services, cybersecurity services. Nonetheless, I think we have identified a number of the same issues that Jan and Matthew have described in the market, related to vendor lock-in and related to problems that our customers specifically note about the freedom to choose between cloud providers. And in our case, I think it's also not only about just choosing one cloud provider over the other, but also making sure that different services that are based on the cloud, like our services, are very they function very differently depending what you need. That those can be with different vendors. So you can have one provider for your delivery network service, one provider for your cloud storage, one other provider for other types of services that are all essentially cloud services. So that is definitely, as Matthew also outlined in his video, I think it is an issue that we have identified already for quite a few years. One of the reasons why we started in 2019 the Bandwidth Alliance, which is a group of like-minded companies, including Scaleway, a number of others that have agreed to all use conference network to be able to waive or significantly reduce egress fees when customers want to move data out of one provider and into another provider. I think one of the things that we have noticed that is kind of like the world turned upside down is that once you become a customer of a cloud provider, there is no charge for the data that you move in, but there's always a charge to move the data out. And I think it's kind of like going to a festival and not paying for a ticket, but then you have to pay before to leave the venue. It's a bit of a upside down kind of principle that we do not see is actually beneficial for development of multi-cloud, development of competition in the market as well. So in that sense, everything that Pierre identified in terms of trying to move, European companies, but globally, I think every company towards a more cloud-based environment, which I think is, where we are headed in the future, trying to encourage that. The charges that are associated with trying to switch to one provider and the other are a significant hurdle for some specifically smaller companies. And we have been trying to do, our part in trying to gather a number of industry players around, this kind of joint, objective to try to waive those fees. We are, looking forward to, the discussions, in Brussels as well around the Data Act, how the proposals that the Commission has put on the table kind of evolve. Watching that with keen interest, because I think there can be, an interesting leading role for Europe as well, also for the rest of the world, to try to see how, policymakers can talk about these issues. So we are, watching that with interest, and I think, looking forward to the rest of the debate as well today, to kind of make a start of that, with that discussion, like where do we want to head with, trying to solve these issues to resolve obstacles. Specifically for all of our customers, but also future customers, like future businesses and organizations that want to move.
Thank you so much, Petra. So, well, the hurdles to get out or move data, and that prevents a free flow of data, that's at least the topic here. Maybe to open up the floor for questions, I have a first question for Pierre, if you may allow me. Pierre, listening to the short presentation of Yen and Petra, what is your first reaction? Do you believe that the Data Act is in line with the level of expectation that is out here for a better and more efficient cloud market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Petra, Jan have presented is indeed very much in the spirit of what we're aiming at in the Data Act. And if I may mention as well, also with the Digital Market Act, in the DMA, we're going to try to tackle problem of abuse of market power, including for cloud services, identifying gatekeepers in this area. In parallel to this, having the emergence of a number of European and non-European players that will increase the degree of competition in Europe is absolutely welcome. Then there is the dimension of making this happen, making this switching really easy for the customers. And Jan, Petra have touched upon a number of important points, and I will focus on two maybe. One is the egress fees. Indeed, it's currently unacceptable. We have heard horror stories from customers on the amount of money that they had to pay to change from cloud service provider. This is a complete rip-off. Really, that cannot happen today on the European market, especially on modern technologies that are the backbone of the European digital economy. So that's why we have mandated the gradual reduction of egress fees. So we totally respect the fact that there will need to be a certain time of adaptation, notably with respect to the implementation of interoperability standard and open interfaces. I will come back to this in a second. But once this is put in place, then there should be no reason to charge customers for moving to a different service provider. Now on interoperability, because this is really the cornerstone of making a fluid European cloud and data services market happen. there must be interoperability across the board at all level of the cloud stack, so which includes infrastructure, but also up to the higher level of data services. There must be seamless interoperability. And the only way to make this happen, that's what we have been proposing in the Data Act, is that there are open interfaces that are based on recognized standard. So can be European standard, but can also be international standard, can also be open technical specification for which there is obviously a broad consensus from industry that this represent the common views of industrial players, that this is the way industry should talk to each other, or that the system produced by data service providers should talk with each other. So the Commission will put in place through the Data Act the mechanism to be able to identify and then reference those interoperability standards, so that there is no doubt for developers, notably, what sort of standard their services should abide with in order to be interoperable with others. So I think with these two key type of provision, I think we're totally geared toward making this happen in Europe and making Europe a leader in having full interoperability among data services, which will have positive spillover on the rest of the global market.
Thank you so much, Pierre. I hear switching costs, getting them low, avoiding excessive egress. I hear interoperability and European standards, different solutions. So maybe Yen and Petra, you can choose one or go for both. What's your reaction? Where do you feel is this Data Act at the level of your ambitions? Where could we go further? Where are we really happy with what we are having? What's the next step? Maybe Yen?
Okay, I'll start. So of course the regulation will help because it is a guide for the market, and also will raise some barriers and create sanctions when market behaviors are not in line with the guide. From our end, of course, we want to participate in enlightening the market about what's going on, because it's very complex. It's actually very complex. What really matters is to actually think about the client and the end user. So if you think about these two, you look at what the need is, and then you take a snapshot in 2022 and how we've come to where we are today. What I see is a myth and a lie, which is that one provider should provide everything. That is a danger, because in no other industry that is the case. In every other industry, there are at least two providers for core functionalities. In fact, in the CHIPS Act, there is a notion of doubling the market share from European standpoint in terms of producing chips. That is an objective in terms of quantified metrics. But the other objective is to also make sure that everyone depending on chips uses two providers. And that is quintessential. In other words, if we talk about multi-cloud, we should talk about dual cloud minimum, because that very notion will create the proper dimensions for proper level playing field, right? Because right now the market is skewed. So the regulator will step in, the regulator will set some rules. These rules will take some time to be applied. It will take some time also to create sanctions. Some of these sanctions, we know, sometimes are just a slap on the wrist. So we need that. And on the other hand, we need to think about the client. How do we create the products? Cloudflare being working on that Scaleway as well. Do we create the products that actually make it possible for the clients to think multi-cloud after the fact? So in some cases, they've already done the work. They've already built an infrastructure, say on AWS or even Scaleway. But how do we help them think multi-cloud after the fact, or think multi-cloud, that's a better scenario, before creating the next architecture in the cloud? So we've worked on two products that are called Cosmos, which is one of the first multi-cloud control plane for Kubernetes. I apologize for the slang, but essentially it's a product that allows to build from the foundation up a multi-cloud workload balancer. So we can put computing on one side, computing on the other side. But as you know, when you put computing, there's always a workload and a payload. The payload is the data. So the data has to flow freely between everything. So that's where content distribution networks, that's where load balancers come into play. So we have a multi-cloud load balancer. This is a product we didn't have to do. But to do this product, we have to acknowledge the existence of other cloud providers by leveraging standards, by leveraging open APIs. So the market exists. There is a lot of gravitation towards the dominant player. That is fine. It's not a criticism of the products they've built. In fact, on the contrary, I have a lot of admiration for the products they've built. And what we need to do is to shake up the market to make sure that we create the proper conditions for the clients and the end users to actually have the best possible experience down the line in terms of data, but also in terms of resilience. Again, coming back to geopolitics, what happens if for some reason the cord, the transatlantic cable is cut? What happens to us, right? And the multi-cloud paradigm will create the conditions for resilience. What happens if one of the providers decides to ramp up the prices 10 times? Not possible, right? Because the economics no longer scale. That's why affordability and resilience will play a role. Again, it's up to us to provide these tools, but the market cannot be locked in. And that is precisely what we bring to the table. So that's for the notion of lock-in / reversibility aspect through the products, making sure that data transport is not prevented, of course, in the process.
Thank you so much, Yen. Do you want to react on this?
Yeah, maybe just to add a little bit from our side. I think we've talked about costs and we talked about the kind of the classic kind of vendor lock-in type situations that we see. But we haven't really spoken maybe about the references just now, Jan. Other kind of characteristics of vendor lock-in that we have seen, at least in what we have observed, obviously, also being a little bit of an outsider and outside observer, different interfaces, different APIs that clouds do. So, yeah, we're speaking about interoperability. I think it's also, that is definitely something that we hear from customers and we hear from the market as well, is that there are definitely efforts that can be done to, make sure that that is more interoperable, to ensure, smooth transition once, people are actually leaving or changing or adopting multiple solutions at the same time, that there is more of that kind of ability to use the same interfaces, or at least the interfaces are interoperable with each other. I think also moving everything, regardless of the data move, but also everything else, like just moving provider is still, I think, an issue that people note that kind of keeps them from doing the effort to actually leave. And also the fact that obviously, as you mentioned, like at the moment, it's very easy to integrate within a single platform. So once you are, within a environment which offers multiple services and you build your cloud infrastructure, it is just the ease of use, right? Which at the moment, I think also making it attractive for other providers is also something that it's still not really there, or at least not perceived to be there for everybody. So I think, for us, in terms of how, coming back to your question about how can the Data Act, support this, or what do we think about the additions of the Data Act? I think whatever happens, with the discussions in Brussels, and it can take a number of years for this to be kind of becoming reality, but I think customer choice is always at the heart of it for us. So if, anything that is kind of happens on that, on all those kind of elements of switching in the Data Act, tries to tackle vendor lock-in issues, the traditional things that we've just mentioned, tries to promote open standards as much as possible, and as well as, gives opportunities to move towards a multi-cloud model. I think those are the kind of three elements of opportunity that are there that the Data Act can help facilitate. It's not maybe the thing that will solve every issue that we're seeing in the market, or globally also. Obviously this is European legislation, but I think those three elements are very key to try to tackle at least one point in this going forward. If we can move it a little bit slightly more towards those kind of elements, then I think that would already be very beneficial for the market as a whole and for the uptake of cloud in Europe as well.
I may add, there's one word we didn't talk about, which is the notion of bundling. So this probably affects you more than it does us, because we have a plethora of products in a cloud service provider sense. In your case, as a CDN provider, the bundling in some of the cloud providers of CDN and cloud service providers is a problem. So the unbundling is perhaps something that, of course, the regulator can look into, because that's a universal and well-known problem, actually. But it is predominant in the cloud business.
Thank you so much. Before we continue, I have, of course, a number of questions ready, as you can suspect, that to get the discussion going. But I would be really happy to hear in the room or online, are there people that have questions? Please raise your hand. Yes.
Thanks, Matthias from Worldwide. I had a question, of course. We're talking about the cloud. There's obviously 3 hyperscalers. Do you see a difference between the 3 in terms of approach to this issue, or do you just see overall block? And I know Brad Smith from Microsoft was here a couple of weeks ago to talk cloud and competition. How do you perceive that and see that as kind of welcome approach? And then follow-up question on that is the US hyperscalers, of course, but then there's the Chinese, Tencent, Alibaba coming in with a lot of resources and a lot of scale. How do you see that competition?
Yeah. Should we leave maybe the floor to Pierre again, because I see digital bit more difficult. Pierre, do you want to start and kick off the reaction?
Yeah, well, as regulator, obviously, we treat all market actors equally, where we provide horizontal level regulation that apply to everyone. Nevertheless, we see that there are different business models that are emerging, some of which are more concerning than others. Especially, we see that some players are very vertically integrated, as Jan was pointing out in the specific case of CDN, but we see also other forms of bundling that are equally worrying for us, where certain providers are providing SaaS services with a business model where then the IaaS services are provided free of charge. So then that creates anti-competitive for those IaaS players that are solely focusing on this market. So that's definitely a problem. So the vertical integration is something we're looking at through the implementation of the DMA and how the business model of some of the gatekeepers, I mean, they still need to be identified, of course, but how vertical integration in particular could represent a problem in terms of abuse of market power.
And do you want to react to that?
So, because Pierre is not at liberty to say, I will translate, but that's fine, because again, we need to recognize the amount of effort, the amount of engineering effort that these companies have put into play, their masterful execution of marketing worldwide, and the softness of Europe, of course, allows this company to be where they are. AWS is a company that was largely subsidized by the e-commerce website above it, Amazon. Now, this company is indeed very integrated because they've built, and this is the leader today in terms of technology stack, right? So that's where they are. And this one is very particular because of this vertical integration and the depth of its catalog. Following up quickly afterwards is Microsoft. Microsoft is clearly also bundling a software as a service solution on top of IaaS and PaaS, which is not the case of AWS. AWS doesn't have SaaS solutions, so it's a different breed. But Microsoft Azure is catching up to AWS because of its partnerships with distributors and integrators and so on. So it's a different beast altogether. Google is sort of following Microsoft also with a SaaS offering on top of the search engine. So again, a very different beast, but all of these entities have been subsidized by the parent company in a way, by the SaaS business, to be where they are. And that's why the topic is mingled with the DMA and the DSA and all other topics that we're dealing with right now, because the state of the affair is that these are trillion-dollar companies not participating, for instance, by not paying taxes in Europe in a way that would be balanced. Again, you have people there doing what they're supposed to do, which is optimize for taxes, right? That's a job which is relevant and permitted. So in other words, the situation today is a sort of oligopoly, if you wish, because of market dominance. Again, it's somewhat legal to do what they did because they played by the book, and then at some point, perhaps the regulator says enough, and there's a fine. So you mentioned the Chinese players coming by copying the same models. Again, Chinese companies, unfair advantage, largely subsidized in some other ways. A cloud provider is a multi-billion-euro affair, Scaleway included, right? So it takes a lot of capital, but it takes even more capital to actually break this oligopoly or dominant position. When you think about 2021, the cloud market was a 370 billion market with a 30% growth year on year. And yet 80% of the growth was captured by 3 players. So in other words, what we're talking about is regulation to actually create a level playing field. But the trend is really, really bad. It's skewed towards this vortex. So these players have their own specificities, right? And we have solutions that are modular. It turns out that in 2022, 80% of the use cases can be serviced by 20% of the catalog of, say, AWS. So most of the clients could actually be fine with just Cloudflare or just Scaleway or a combination of both. Don't have to be with AWS. But the market, again, it's a vortex. So we need to actually deconstruct. We need to think about what the client needs, how we create duality. So multi-cloud is a way, multiplicity, so that we recreate a sort of a sane competition within the market around technologies, which, by the way, have been invented in Europe.
Thank you so much, Jan. Do you want to react on this? No further reaction? If no further reaction, I actually have a question from online Quentin Lawrence from Warnox. I'm not sure I pronounce it well and apologize for not pronouncing it well. What link or consequences do you concretely see between the credits offered by these gatekeepers and lock-in effects?
We're talking about cloud credits, right? A quick comment. So cloud credits is clearly a way to bring clients into the fold by offering negative prices. So again, if you have companies that are currently trillion-dollar companies, how much free credits can they give? Billions, right? So how does that actually help solve the problem of skewed markets? So cloud credits is a problem in my view, because cloud credits are designed to make sure there is no reversibility. In fact, the sequence is the following: cloud credits, which create negative prices, and after 1 year, expensive egress fees. So it's a double hook to actually hook the clients in, lure them in, force them to not leave. So this mechanism is the contrary of the very standard notion of sampling. Sampling, when you go into cosmetics, it's a little sample. You press once and you're done. You've sampled it. Here, the sample is 100,000 euros. 100,000 euros worth of credits, sometimes more, over 1 year. So developers are like, oh yes, fun, free credits. And then after a year, they're hooked, no turning back. So of course, cloud credits create additional conditions for lock-in and mono-vendor problems.
Thank you. I see a little hand raised there.
Yeah.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Josephine. I'm from the Parliament. Oh, sorry. I'm with MEP Morten Lykkegaard, who's going to be the Renew Shadow in the IMCO committee. I find everything you say very interesting to hear. We're very eager to start working on this proposal. I noticed, Petra, that you mentioned the idea of customer choice and that should be an option. I noticed also in the proposal in Article 5, to be specific, that there's a wording on customers not being allowed to bring data that they have taken either from a gatekeeper or from any other provider and bring it back to a gatekeeper, from how I understood it. Pierre, you're wrinkling your eyebrows. Please correct me if we've understood it wrongly, but that's the current understanding, at least in terms of free choice. Is it the ambition to limit the ability to bring data to a gatekeeper? And also, I was wondering if you would comment on the idea or the concept on functional equivalence between cloud providers. It would be interesting to hear what that entails more specifically.
Okay, yeah, many thanks for the question. I'm not sure which terminology you're referring to, but maybe this is related to the on-premise terminology, which has nothing to do with gatekeeper or hyperscaler. So just to precise the intention, we want full fluidity regardless of the provider. We do not discriminate anyone, but conversely, we want to prohibit vendor lock-in practices. So any customer should be able to be totally free to place their data, their application wherever they deem necessary. And if at some point in time they are not happy with any of the market players, they want to repatriate back the data, the application on their own infrastructure, that's what we call on-premise, they are also free to do so. And any combination of these, that should also work out. So that's a key enabler of the multi-cloud approach. So I think that the key thing you should remember, we want full fluidity. The customer should be free to decide where they want to place their data, their application, with which provider, and whenever they want to terminate the contract, they should be able to move to a different provider or retrieve, get back their data, their application. Jan introduced an important notion in one of his intervention. He talked about resilience. I think that's a very important element of what we're trying to do here as well. A key benefit of such multi-cloud approach. There is huge risk to put to keep for an organization all their data, their application within their own infrastructures. There is equally risk in placing all of them with a single vendor. For those of you who have looked at what we did with the financial sector, I think it's really worth looking at the Digital Operational Resilience Act. This really prefigured a lot of our thinking for the Data Act. So we worked a lot with this sector, the banking and financial sector, which is obviously very advanced in terms of digital maturity. And we looked with them at how banks, financial services could and should improve their digital resilience, especially when they outsource certain functions to third-party ICT providers. Yet again, we came with the same conclusion. Banks, financial services should be able to move easily to different service provider. They should be able to preserve certain critical function in-house on the basis of risk assessment, notably in coordination with the regulating authority, but at the same time be able to move less critical function of banks and financial services to external ICT providers, and then have the possibility to move easily among different service providers. So resilience, that's absolutely key. And we will see that across all sectors of the European economy. Just finance was a bit more at the forefront, but digital transformation is starting now across all sectors of the economy, so they will all encounter the same problem. So it's very important that we create now the right framework condition to ensure this market fluidity.
Thank you so much, Yen. Any reaction here? Petra, Yen? We move to the next question.
You also had a question on functional equivalence.
Functional equivalence, that's right.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for reminding me. Sorry about that. Yeah. We also want that when customer request transfer of data, transfer of application, that the demand are realistic as well. If you are currently using an infrastructure service and want to transfer this to a completely different category of service, that's really not realistic. So this importance of functional equivalence is important. So if you're using a cloud-based mailing service, you can aim for a transfer to a cloud-based email service provided by another provider, but not to a different type of service. So that degree of functional equivalence is also to reassure the provider side that the demand that they will receive are not unrealistic.
Okay, I see we have 5 more minutes before the end of the event. I had a little last question maybe for you, Yen and Petra. I see in the Digital Compass that the Commission wants 75% of all companies to use cloud services by 2030. And I was thinking, do you believe that's realistic? Do you think we will get there? What would you need in order to achieve those 75?
The market is growing at a 30% rate every year. 80% of the IT worldwide is not in the cloud. So we can do 5x. Completely possible, but it really doesn't matter. Right? So again, it's a compass, it's a guide, and clearly that's the way things are going to be unless we have a global world war. That's a different scenario. But the point is, right now, the cloud provides, for instance, when we had the COVID, it provides the elasticity that we need to actually react quickly. And cloud providers, we carry the capex. We spend, hundreds of thousands of millions of euros or billions to buy the hardware and to make it available in the most efficient way. Actually, the cloud is quite efficient if you look at the economies of scale. We buy the hardware and we slice it in a way that makes it extremely elastic for everyone, day and night, with payloads. So the cloud providers, in their various forms, are able to do so. The more we actually create competition amongst all of the cloud players, the more we can address that target in a way that is sustainable. If we are not careful about opening up the playing field, then of course, maybe not 75%, but most of the value will be captured by a few players. And that is the worst possible scenario to me. Not achieving 75 is not the main issue, but achieving 50% where most of the value is captured by the same players, disastrous. So to me, achieving 75 not only is possible, but it's possible in the best possible way as a society globally, as an open market, clearly, with reciprocity, with balance. In fact, I would argue that Europe has a role to play as a sparring partner with the US. The US may not see it this way today. There's an article in the US Chamber of Commerce that says Europeans are starting to bother us with their regulation because they're preventing us to pick their pockets to build jobs in the US. I think that's very clear. In the US, they want to create jobs. Also do we. We do need to create jobs in Europe, value-added jobs. And we need to make sure that this goal, which actually is reasonable, 75% into the cloud, because that is the way to distribute compute, which is actually expensive to produce in terms of carbon emissions, right? The chips, the hardware, the hard drive, the SSDs, all of these things actually are costly to the planet, to the buyers. So how do we actually maximize utility of these items precisely by creating a very competitive field that works?
I think from my side, I hope it is a realistic target, because I think it would be great to have this uptake by 2030. I think that is it's probably achievable. I mean, you know more beyond about the market than me, so obviously I'm not an expert in what the figures look like today. But I think if you're asking, your second question was like, what is needed to achieve this goal? I think if, as I said, like, if, for example, something like an instrument like the Data Act can contribute to making it easier for specifically small businesses, non-cloud native business, more traditional sectors to kind of adopt cloud solutions, including European cloud solutions, of course, from Scaleway's perspective, especially. I think that is that would be extremely helpful, even to kind of build on the enabling, every business from every size or every organization from every size to go into the cloud and also feel empowered to make the choices that they want to make. So I think that is kind of what we want to feel with the Data Act, and just generally in the market, also amongst companies like ourselves, we want to try to make sure that there's as little barrier as possible for people to start using cloud services, but also once they're in that environment, that also if they're not happy, if they have specific issues, if they have a lot of costs, that they can easily choose other solutions that fit better with the business model, fit better with, for example, a growing business that needs different solutions and different services, or can bundle, for example, different types of services. So I think that's where we have to all work towards. And then on the topic of today, I hope that eventually how some of the elements of the Data Act will be able to help stimulate that as well, so that we can reach that goal by 2030, hopefully.
Actually, could you comment for a second on the fact, and I think that is the case, but do you have the same problem in the US? With Cloudflare being a US company on the US market, I think the US market is currently stifled also for the same reasons.
Yes, I think it's very similar from what we've heard from our US colleagues as well as from our US customers. Yes, it's not a European problem; it's a global, issue. And also some of the members of the Bandwidth Alliance, we have American companies, we have European companies, we have Asian companies as well that are members of our alliance. So I think the vendor lock-in issue as such is recognized globally as an issue in many markets. And in fact, on the US side, just speaking about the legacy side of US developments, the US House has looked at, looked at competition in cloud markets as well, same as in Europe, and they have, noted in one of the, I think it's the Competition Digital Markets report from, I think it's 2021, I'm not very sure. They have identified, for example, Egress Fees is one of the issues that was really highlighted as a core, element of vendor lock-in, for example. So it's very similar what we see in the US and also in other markets outside of Europe. So it's definitely interesting to see that Europe is moving first in this way to try to tackle this through through legislation. We'll see what happens in other markets, whether that also will be a precursor to what will happen in other markets.
Thank you, Pierre, for being a pioneer.
I have one maybe final question from the online audience. So if you can bear with me one more minute, and then we can move to the final and closing comments. But to not discriminate the people who connected online, I see a question from Alexandre Picard. Maybe Alexandre, you wanna? It's going to be in writing. If Alexandre is there, he can ask the question.
You can
I can read it. Okay. What do you think of Microsoft, Orange, or Google Tails alliances? Could they be rendered useless by the new privacy shield?
So question for
Yeah, I was going to.
Yeah, that's opening a whole new chapter of discussion on EU-US data flow, as well as the problem of data sovereignty in Europe, which represent a major issue. And by the way, coming back to my very early statement, is also one of the reasons we have identified many European enterprises currently do not want to move to the cloud. So there are huge concern among European businesses that when they move to the cloud, there is indeed a risk that their data may be accessed without them being ever aware of it by surveillance authorities or law enforcement authorities from third countries. And if you place yourself in the shoes of a CEO of any European business, of course, that's a very legitimate concern. There are huge risks in terms of loss of IPR, in terms of economic intelligence, in terms of competitiveness. So this is a very, very legitimate concern. When it comes to the public sector, because I think the the construct that the person who asked the question referred to, our understanding is that they have been primarily been set up for the purpose of public administrations in France and in Germany. Public authorities equally share the concern that I've just expressed, that sensitive governmental data could be accessed by third countries, and here, of course, it's all aspect of the sovereignty of a nation, of national security, public safety that start coming into consideration. So at the same time, public authorities, they also want to modernize themselves, and cloud is a key prerequisite for them. So these constructs seem a bit like a compromise to, on one end, be able to use certain categories of cloud services while preserving some guarantees on the sovereignty of the data of public authorities. Will that be a sustainable construct? First of all, will that work as a construct that we will continue monitoring very closely? But we, also that's our prime concern, is that will this be sustainable as a construct? Because if each and every member state start reconstructing this sort of silo for the respective public administration, that's going to be a problem at European level. We want to foster free flow of data for public authorities. We want to build European common data spaces, including for various public a sector of public interest. So that's going to be very difficult if we have this siloed cloud in every European country. So we'll continue monitoring this very closely. We understand it may represent a short-term patch to a very complex problem, but let's see how sustainable those solutions are.
Thank you, Pierre. Maybe a closing remark, Pierre, in one sentence, what is your main takeaway from today's discussion?
So, well, first of all, many thanks for the very rich discussion and the question that were raised. We're very happy that players like Scaleway, like Cloudflare, which are a bit less known from the broader public, are emerging or becoming vocal or making themselves more present on the market. As I mentioned, bringing back diversity on the cloud market in Europe is absolutely essential for us. Through the Digital Market Act, through the Data Act, we're trying to put in place the framework conditions to facilitate this. But then we must also have private enterprises who are seizing the challenge, and very happy to see two of leading candidates for this.
Thank you so much, Pierre, for this. And maybe in one word, same thing for you, Petra, and you, Yen. What's your final highlight? What is it you want to tell us to close the discussion?
I think we still have a lot of discussions to go, and this is just a very initial, I think, but very indeed very rich discussion today. So we're very happy that share that with all of you and everybody online as well. Great, thanks for listening to us, I would say. Yes, I'm looking forward to to see how the data act discussions develop, and also if everything that we talked about here can be addressed in some way in the upcoming discussion. What about you, Yen?
We may not know it, but we are defining the premises of Humanity 2.0. Let's not forget that in Europe was born free will and the Renaissance in a way that redefined and protected the way we think, the way we build society. Again, the one thing we've talked about is sovereignty from a nation standpoint. There's also sovereignty from a client standpoint. We haven't talked about sovereignty from an individual standpoint. And about 10, 15 years ago, there was a paradigm shift. In the past, sovereignty was designed around our cylinder, the one that protects us physically. So when we were in a cave or in a room locked in, we were sovereign in terms of our data, our thoughts. And nowadays, because we are connected, companies like Facebook actually can correlate pretty much everything we are as individuals. The essence of us is captured by the data stream. So that's why actually that is so important. In other words, as individuals, how far are we willing to give up the essence of what we've been for millions of years, actually? So this meeting today, but also all these topics together, represent something quite essential. So I'm very happy to participate in the conversation, happy to talk afterwards also, and continue the conversation in a way that is solemn, because that there is a lot at stake beyond corporations, for profit or not. The regulator is here to protect us also from the market level, but at a higher level. So again, I think we've touched on the essence of something important, and thank you for participating and bring your sparkle to this.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Pierre. Thank you so much, Yen and Petra, for this very fruitful discussion. My conclusion is that there is a lot more to discuss, and this is only the beginning of the discussion. Hence why I will also invite everyone in the room to continue already a little bit of discussion for a drink upstairs on the 6th floor. And then thank you also for everyone connecting online. I'm sure that we will have other opportunities to discuss the challenges ahead in future. So hereby I close today's event. Thank you.
Merci Pierre.
Merci, profitez bien du drink.
Bon, good recovery to you.